Hey there, welcome back to Alfred's Basic Adult Piano Course, Lesson Book Level 1. Today's video is Lesson 48, covering page 54 in our book. 2 songs, London Bridge and Michael Row the Boat Ashore. So before we look at our first song, London Bridge, let's take a look at the keyboard diagram there at the top of the page. So in the diagram, we've got our left hand and we got our right hand. And it says there, when you play in positions that include 6 or more notes, any finger may be required to play 2 notes. So let's look at our right hand first. So what we've been doing in the book, mostly up to this point, is the C position in the right hand, which puts your thumb on C, 2 on D, 3 on E, 4 on F, and 5 on G. But now recently we've been learning and playing the A above G. So what they're doing here in this diagram is you've got your thumb on C, but sometimes your thumb will also play D. So that's why they have 1 written below C and 1 written below D. So your thumb is going to be, I guess, doing double duty right there, C and D. But your second finger is going to be on E, third finger on F, 4 on G, and 5 on A. So this is basically your position for your right hand for London Bridge. Your left hand normally was playing the C position right here. 5 on C, 4 on D, 3 on E, 2 on F, and thumb on G. Now you can look at the diagram, that hasn't changed. But something which we've actually been doing for a while is that 5th finger will bounce back and forth between B and C. You remember the G7 chord. That's probably the first time or one of the first times we ever did that. You will be using that chord here in London Bridge. So really not that much different in the left hand than what you're used to. What's going to feel a little bit different is more so in the right hand. All right, so make sure you've got your position like this for your right hand as we look at London Bridge. And if you look at London Bridge in the treble clef, our very first note is a G. But you'll notice right off the bat that that G has a 4 above it. So 4th finger on G, not the 5 on G that we were used to in the normal C position, but it's 4 on G. And the reason for that is because our next note is A, and we need our 5th finger for that A. And then we're going to come back to G, and then F, and then E in the next measure, back to F, and back to G. Notice on our third measure, it's a D, but it's not 2 on D, it's our thumb on D. So that means when you play the E right after it, that's going to be your 2nd finger. And then F is your 3rd finger. And the last measure, E, which again is our 2nd finger, and then F, and then G. On the second line, we have the same note again. We have a G, 4th finger, just like the very beginning of the song. And then we go to 5 on A. Back to that G, and then F. Next measure, E, which should be your 2nd finger, 3 on F, 4 on G. Third measure, it's a D, once again with our thumb. Now here we have a skip. We have a 4th. We're going from D to G. And it works out well here because look at the fingering. 1 on D, 4 on G. So 4th, 1 and 4. That works well together in this case. And then our last measure, our 2nd finger's on E. And our very last note is middle C, which is a thumb. And they make note there, a skip of a 3rd with 2 and 1. So when we did thirds, the intervals of a 3rd earlier in the book, it was pretty normal that we would, play the 3rd with 3 and 1. Our fingering, right? So for example, 3 on E and 1 on C. But here, you're playing the interval of a 3rd with 2 and 1 on the fingering. So that's something to get used to in piano. Intervals can be any fingering. I mean, you could do a 5th with 2 and 1. So if you've kind of memorized, oh, well, a 5th is going to be 5 and 1, or a 3rd is 3 and 1, No, not necessarily. That's just a way to kind of easily get us started and just, to make sense of it in the beginning. But when it comes to playing intervals, there's a variety of ways you could play the same interval, a variety of fingerings, just depending on the situation. So here it's 2 on E and thumb on C, which is not difficult because our thumb and pointer finger really can stretch quite a bit. Our hands are designed that way. So like I showed you earlier, you can do a fifth with those two fingers, not a problem. All right, so that covers the fingering and the notes in the treble clef. Now let's look at the rhythms in the treble clef. So back at the beginning, our very first rhythm on that G is a dotted quarter note. And when you see a dotted quarter note, most likely it's followed by an eighth note. And together they make 2 beats. So the dotted quarter note is 1.5 beats. So you would count that as 1 and 2. And then that eighth note that follows is on the and of 2. And there's our two full beats. So it would go like this: 1 and 2 and. Now what happens when you get to beat 3 and 4, which are quarter notes, since we're counting with ands, remember you have to honor everything now with the ands. So you can't simply say 3, 4 on beats 3 and 4. You have to say 3 and 4 and. Because if I just say 3, 4, I'm going to rush those quarter notes, and they're going to be more like eighth notes, which is incorrect. So the whole measure sounds like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now that's the only measure that has that rhythm. The rest of the measures on that top line are just quarter notes, half notes. But again, you have to honor the full value of all those rhythms. So in the second measure, it's going to be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. In the third measure, it's going to be the same thing. In fact, if you look at the music, rhythmically, measures 2, 3, and 4 in the treble clef are exactly the same. Quarter note, half note. So there's always something good about consistency, right? So it's very consistent. Now, speaking of repetition, you go down to the second line, first measure. It's the exact same thing as the first line, first measure. Note for note, finger for finger, rhythm for rhythm. So second line, first measure is this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The next measure is the same thing too as the second measure on the first line: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now the third measure is different. Got half notes. Again, honor the entire half note by counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then our last measure, quarter note, dotted half note, goes like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now some of you might be saying, but that's so slow. Yeah, it'll go faster. But you got to remember that you got to be able to play the hard measure, the difficult measure, accurately first, which is, in my opinion, the first measure. Okay, so what happens a lot that I see is that people will slow down the first measure because it's difficult. And then when they get to these other measures, they just fly right through it. So what happens is you have a piece of music that is just uneven throughout. It doesn't have a steady beat. And so you certainly don't want to get in that habit, because for you might be like, oh, feels normal. I'm playing what I know, faster, better. But for the listener, they're like, you're making the song like inconsistent. It's hard to get a groove. It's hard to feel it. So you got to keep that in mind. You always got to listen to yourself too. So evenness is the key. Get everything nice and slow and even first, all on the same page, and then start getting it gradually faster. All right, so now I'm going to do that. I'm going to play the right hand for you. Not too fast yet, but a little bit faster than I was playing. I'll give a count off, and then I'll play it all the way through for you. So it goes like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Hey, good. So at that point, there is a repeat sign. And when you repeat it back to the beginning, you're going to do two things differently. One of those things is you're going to play it an octave higher. Only in the right hand, though, because there it says at the beginning, second time, play right hand an octave higher. Now, remember, you're down here, your thumb is on middle C, you've got this new fingering position. An octave higher means bring that thumb to this C, but you want to maintain this finger position. So as you jump, don't resort back to the old position. Keep that little stretch. So you're going to think about your C and the E, 1 and 2. When you move up, keep that C and E locked in place, or that 1 and 2 locked in place on C and E. Your other fingers will fall naturally. Okay? And then it's the exact same thing played again, just up an octave. And we've done this a few times in some previous pieces. But there's one other thing, volume. At the beginning, there's two dynamic markings. It says F-P, so forte and piano. When there's a dash like that, it means forte played the first time. So when I'm down here playing it as written, I'm going to play it loud. And then when I repeat it back to the beginning and I'm an octave higher, I'm going to play it soft. And musically, that makes it a lot more interesting. If I repeated the piece and played it the exact same way twice, it's going to be boring. But playing it an octave higher, playing it softer, makes it far more interesting. Okay, so that takes care of the right hand. The left hand is really, really easy. You have two chords this entire piece. So remember, our left hand C position is what's going to work here. Occasionally that pinky goes to B, but you're really coming to that C position like you always have. Your very first chord is the C major chord, and it's tied for 2 full measures. So you won't play anything again until measure 3, which is the G7. Again, both these chords you're familiar with. And then the last measure, you're back to C. The exact same thing on the bottom line. And the C chord is tied in those first 2 measures once again. Now, the hard thing, it doesn't have to be perfect because it really is hard and it really can take years to master this. But the hard thing is when you put the hands together, remember you want the melody, which is in the right hand, to be louder than your chords in the left hand. Now, for some people that might mean make the melody louder. For some people it might mean I need to make the chord softer. Either way, but as long as the first time you play it, overall it's a loud volume because we do want forte. So what I recommend is playing the right hand forte and the left hand maybe mezzo forte. Even mezzo piano actually is good. There's no reason these chords need to be that loud. It's background, it's accompaniment. So if it's soft, as long as it can still be heard, it's fine. The volume is really your melody. So you can hear I'm practically playing forte in the right hand and I'm practically playing mezzo piano in the left hand. And that's a good balance for this. But like I said, it's not easy doing that. Our hands are kind of wired to play the same together, so it takes practice. But really the moment you have to work on is beat 1 of each measure, because once you hit that chord, you're done. So it's the initial hit on beat 1. So at the very beginning of the piece right here, that's the spot that determines it. So what I would practice is think heavy in the right hand, light. So I'm not talking about volume, I'm talking about touch now. Drop into that note if you have to. Heavy, sink in all the way. But the chord, it's almost like you're playing the surface of the keys. You're not sinking in. You're almost backing out of it a little bit. You're kind of timid with your touch there. Whereas in the right hand, it's confident and sure of itself. But doing it together, again, is still hard. So when you do it together, heavy here, light here. And if you have to overdo it, that's okay. You're just learning the concept at first. So you can hear the difference. You can see the difference, how I'm really dropping in. Again, I'm exaggerating it. I won't drop quite like that, but for learning purposes, go ahead and do that. And then, like I said, once you're there, you're good until the next measure, which is measure 3. Same deal. Drop in with the right hand, light in the left hand. And then again on the last measure. And you do the same thing in the bottom line. But it does take a lot of work. So that covers the right hand and left hand, and you've already heard a little bit of the hands together. So I'm going to play it all the way through for you right now. I'll give you a count off, and then I'll just play. I'm going to take the repeat so you can hear the volume difference as well as the right hand going up an octave. So I got my hand positions. My right hand especially is the one I want to be careful of. And a little count off. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And there it is. So actually it's going to be harder when you play up the octave because that is all soft. But at the same time, I still need my melody louder in the right hand. So I'm not going to be able to pound it out as much as I did when I was down here. So that means my left hand might have to be really soft. And it's hard to play chords like that soft. So now you can cheat a little bit and play it more like mezzo piano in the right hand, which is still a contrast from the forte earlier. So what it comes down to is as long as it's softer, noticeably softer, you're good. I think everyone has their own idea of where forte lies on the spectrum and where piano lies. But in my opinion, as long as there's contrast and we hear that contrast, we're in pretty good shape. All right, so before you even get to Michael Row the Boat Ashore, there's some work to do in London Bridge. Once you've successfully completed London Bridge, look at Michael Row the Boat Ashore. Now it's basically similar concepts on this page of the right hand specifically, playing in a different position. It's actually not really playing in a different position in London Bridge, but what I've noticed here, and you'll see on the diagram there, is that they didn't even label D, meaning for Michael Row the Boat Ashore, there's no D in the right hand of the song, so you don't even have to worry about a D at all. So you're actually in the same hand position you did for London Bridge. Thumb on C, and then 2 on E, 3 on F, 4 on G, 5 on A. You just won't even play a D. So I guess in that sense, it's actually easier than London Bridge. So let's look at the right hand. Right off the bat, you've got a pickup measure. You've only got 2 beats, but it's 4/4 times. So that's beats 3 and 4. Now I can see in the next measure, we have 1/8 notes. So it's going to be 3 and 4 and. But let's just look at the notes first. So we got thumb on C. And there's that E, so we're skipping a third, but we're not skipping fingers. It's going to be 2 on E. Then the first full measure, we've got a G, 4th finger. Then we come down a third to E again. And then we go back to that G again. And then up to A. So your 5th finger should be on that A. And then the next measure, G again. Skipping down to E. Skipping back to G. So you notice there's a lot of skips already between E and G. We haven't played an F yet. So a lot of 2nd finger, 4th finger. Okay, on the 3rd full measure, we have an A whole note. And our last measure, G. And then we rest for a little while. We don't come in again until the last 2 measures of the piece. There at the bottom, we have half notes. G. This is our only F now of the entire piece. In the right hand, and then E, which is 2 counts because remember we had the pickup measure. or an incomplete measure. So 1 and 2 and then repeat it 3 and 4 and. So let's look at our rhythms now in the right hand. So like I said, the pickup measure is 3 and 4 and. So we got 3 and 4 and. Next measure, this is a dotted quarter note. 1.5 beats. 1 and 2, followed by an eighth note on the and. And then 2 quarter notes. 3 and 4 and. Next measure, half note. 1 and 2 and. Quarter notes. 3 and 4 and. Now, believe it or not, this whole note on this next measure is difficult for people when it comes to counting. Why? Because it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I can guarantee you, if you don't count it out like that, you will rush it because it feels like forever. So it's not uncommon for a piece of music to do that. You can have a really busy measure with lots of rhythms, and then your next measure can just have a note that just sits there forever. It's so easy to just rush that. But as long as you're counting the and system, you'll know exactly how long to hold it for. And then our last measure, half note for 2 counts. 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and. And then you're going to rest on 3 and 4 and. You're going to rest at the bottom, first 2 measures of that line. And then it's half notes at the very end. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Last measure, 1 and 2 and. Unlike London Bridge, this piece repeats and is played the exact same way again. Now, if you were to sing it because it has words, that would be different. You see the words there. There's a first verse and there's a second verse. So that would be the difference. But if I'm just playing the piano, which I think a lot of you are, some of you may not be singing it, it's going to be boring, playing it the same exact way twice. But who's to say you can't play it up an octave higher in the right hand? Who's to say you can't make it softer the second time around? If I were to perform this for someone and I had to repeat it, I would do that to make it interesting. Because otherwise, without the words, without the singing, it's just the same thing again. I leave that up to you. So that covers the right hand. Our left hand, I just noticed there are slurs in the right hand and in the left hand. I did not even mention the slurs in London Bridge, but they are in the right hand in London Bridge. Just means to play it smooth, right? Connect it. You don't want to play it choppy. Hopefully at this point you're not playing anything choppy, because there actually are going to be very few styles of music that actually is meant to be choppy. A lot of the pieces you're playing right now are meant to be smooth. So just smooth and connected. The left hand in Michael rests for the first couple measures there. The left hand doesn't even come in until the whole note there in the second to last measure of the first line, which is a C and an F. Now, my recommendation when you start this piece or any piece of music, have your left hand already there and already think about C and F in particular. I may have my fingers down, curved down, touching those keys, and a little lift from the other fingers, so they're not quite on the key. So I'm ready to go on that C and F when I get there. Don't even have to think about it. The next measure is C and E. And then when the right hand rests on beat 3, the left hand takes over the melody. E to G. And then the bottom line, it's G to E, F, E, D, and then C, D, E, D, C. So a lot of work with our weaker fingers in the left hand there. So like I said, the melody takes over at the end of the first line in the left hand. Notice they were generous. They put mezzo forte there, and that's why. They sang, bring this out. This is the melody. Because when you play the C and the F on the whole note, the measure before, you don't need that to be loud. That's not melody. That's just accompaniment. So you probably want that to be softer than mezzo forte. But when you get to that melody, a little bit louder. Okay. Rhythms in the left hand. So like I said, the whole note you're playing a whole note in the right hand as well. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then the next measure half note. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and down the bottom line, here's your dotted quarter note, 1.5 beats. 1 and 2 and on the 8th note, and then 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and then when you repeat it, the left hand takes a break because of the rests. When you put the hands together, look at the last two measures of the piece. Now on paper, it looks pretty simple. Everything lines up between both hands. They're all half notes. That's great. Well, it would be easier maybe if it was the same fingering in both hands or the same notes, but it's not. So in the right hand, you have a G on that third measure on the bottom line, but your left hand has an E. Fourth and third finger. Now they move down one note at a time. So the next note down in both hands, and then once again. So at least there's that pattern of moving down one note at a time. But you'll notice the fingering. You're not using the same fingerings at the same time. You're not even playing the same notes at the same time. If they were both G's and both F's and both E's, that feels great, but it's not. So just keep this in mind that it looks easy, but it's gonna feel a little, not great maybe for a lot of you. So get used to that. Especially the weak fingers in the left hand make it a little more challenging too. Okay, so back at the beginning with hands together, the right hand starts us off. Keep that left hand ready to go on that whole note a couple measures from now, C and the F. So starting with the right hand, and then both hands together, 1 and, actually let me not do the counting yet, I'm just playing the notes. When you get to the next measure right here, and make sure this one is very clean and clear. So you got this together, and make sure this is all together. So that could be a little challenging too. But keep in mind, the C is the same in the left hand in both of those chords. The top notes, well, the note in the right hand and the top note in the left hand, move down a note each. So there's your moving pattern. Just one key down in both hands. Similar to what we talked about at the bottom of the page. And when that happens, make sure you don't do what I just did and hold on to the C. You definitely want to play the C again too. So lift the hand and left hand a little bit more if you have to. Just enough to get that C down again. And then the left hand continues on its own, a little bit louder like we said. And then both hands together here. They're moving down one note each. And that's it. So there's actually not a lot of right hand and left hand you got to play at the same time. But the times they do come in together, a little challenging. So you might want to single those out and work just those by themselves. Okay, I'm going to play the entire piece through. I won't repeat it, but I will give a count off so you can hear the evenness with the counting. Remember, we come in on beat 3. Got my left hand ready. Got my right hand ready. Here we go. 1 and 2 and. And then you'll repeat. You'll just go right into the beginning without pause. And that is it. So that piece is moderately slow. So not going to go a whole lot faster than that. And like I said, if repeating it sounds a little boring, you can take it up an octave. Now, it shouldn't really throw you off that there's an incomplete measure. But do have to jump right away and be prepared to go. There's really no room for pause. All right, so that covers page 54, London Bridge and Michael row the boat ashore. Spent a little bit of time on those pieces, getting used to mainly the right hand, just learning to play sort of outside the box now. Moving the hand position up slightly towards that A, and either the thumb is doing double duty on C and D, like in London Bridge, or in Michael row the boat ashore, it's just not even playing a D at all. But in the next lesson or two, you're going to definitely be seeing more of this, so you want to get these pieces down pretty well before moving on to lesson 49. All right, thanks again for following. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.